Pathologic 2 is a reimagining of the original Pathologic, which followed the stories of 3 healers as they tried to stop a plague across 12 days. One of those healers was Artemy Barak. So far, Pathologic 2 focuses on his story, with the developers intending to release the stories of the academic, Diurnal Ending, and the changeling Clara at a later date. In this video, I will be recounting his story, or at least one of the paths it can take, and the 4 endings that are available to Artemy. So come with me and return with Artemy to the town on the Gorkon. Artemy's story begins at the end. He finds himself backstage at the theatre. On stage is theatre director Mark Immortal, who is lamenting the failed performance. Mark dismisses Artemy, telling him to collect his final payment from an executor. Artemy is unable to make his way down from the stage, finding that the audience is the dead and the dying. Among the hospital beds, Artemy finds Bachelor of Medicine Diurnal Ending, who is lamenting his own failures, and the changeling Clara, whose mind is on other matters. Making his way upstairs to the balcony, Artemy finds an executor who directs him to the cathedral, which is where the final decision about the fate of the town will be made. Leaving the theatre, Artemy finds that the courtyard is full of army tents, and that the army has seized control of the town. Soldiers combat the plague by turning flamethrowers on the townspeople, their flames finding both the sick and the healthy. Healthy looters taken from the dead are met with similarly lethal force. Artemy also meets the kin woman Abattoir on the way to the cathedral, and she warns him not to trust the Inquisitor, but to speak with the military commander first, once he makes it to the cathedral. As he moves past her, Artemy sees a flash of light, and upon turning round, he finds that Abattoir was already dead, and would have been dead when he thought he was speaking to her. Heading further along and just off the main street, Artemy finds a strange humanoid rat creature, contemplating the colour of the smaller rodents in town, and asking Artemy if he'd like to change them. One more final strange sight greets Artemy on the way to the cathedral. 2 small children stand on the other side of a barrier, silent and still, watching Artemy as he passes, and seemingly untouched by the horrors around them. Entering the cathedral, Artemy sees Commander Alexander Block at one end of the long table, and Inquisitor Arrives at the other. Heeding Aspatoir's advice, Artemy speaks with the commander first, but it is to no avail. Artemy will be unable to convince either the commander or Inquisitor that he can save the town. The army is going to bombard the town anyway, and all is lost. After these conversations, Artemy looks up to see Mark Immortal has appeared in the cathedral as well. He asks if Artemy will insist on a second chance. Artemy replies that what he is asking for is a first chance. The world goes dark, and then it is 12 days earlier, and Artemy is on the train on the way to town. He is returning home after receiving a concerning summons from his father, Isidor Barak. Artemy awakens and moves towards the front of the train carriage, where he sees a coffin fall from a stack of crates. A fellow traveller lets himself out of the coffin, and Artemy asks why he was in there, but his fellow traveller just says that he was hiding, as it is too soon for anyone to see his face. The train then shudders to a stop, and Artemy steps out to see a massive bull, Abattoir, standing on the tracks blocking the train. Executors are crowding around, and they advise Artemy to return to the carriage. Instead, Artemy makes his way down the tracks until he is overcome, succumbing to an infection and falling to the tracks dead. He wakes again back in the train car with his fellow traveller, who confesses that he is afraid people won't be glad to see him. He asks Artemy to share a secret with him before the train stops again, and Artemy finds himself this time in a house. Each room is full of townspeople who turn into tragedians when Artemy approaches them. One person doesn't though. A feverish survivor lies on a bed and asks Artemy for some water. He goes outside to find a water barrel, but first sees a group of children standing over a body, and the train is there with the traveller and more tragedians on the roof. Returning inside with the water, Artemy sees Diurnal and Clara arguing, before they too turn into tragedians. Passing them, Artemy returns to the survivor's room, where an executor now stands watch. Before Artemy can say anything, He finds himself back on the moving train, being shaken awake by his fellow traveller. He tells the traveller that he is looking forward to seeing his father, and the traveller says that he is as well. Artemy then finds himself in a stone circle before a member of the kin, who says that Artemy has forgotten many things, and questions if his heart has rotten from being away too long. If it has, a fight will show it. The two fight and Artemy prevails. The kinsman then offers to exchange hearts with Artemy, replacing Artemy's rotten heart with a good one. Artemy accepts and finds himself on the train once more, via a final conversation with his fellow traveller, who wishes him luck with his father. As Artemy looks away from the traveller, it seems for a second that the traveller has changed form and is now an executor himself, but it is only for a moment. Artemy then leaves the train and heads into his childhood home, hearing his father's voice reading the letter he had sent Artemy. The voice continues as Artemy makes his way upstairs to his father's room, but when he goes to enter, he finds himself instead just leaving the train at the train station. Unfortunately, his welcome back to town is rather unpleasant, and 3 thugs attack him as soon as he disembarks the train. He is able to eliminate them all, but is injured in the process. The attack is witnessed by Laika, a child who offers Artemy a tourniquet for its injuries, and tells him that he thinks the thugs attacked him by mistake, as they were looking for a killer. There are also 2 executors waiting for Artemy, and they give him some advice on how to survive, and also fill him in on the fact that a very important person was killed overnight. Someone who is loved better than some children love their fathers. One of the executors has a reflection behind him, who warns Artemy not to listen to the executor, and not to go home, or into town, but rather to seek out his old friends. Artemy does have 3 childhood friends in the town: Lara Ravel, Stanislav Rubin, and Bad Grief. Bad Grief lives in the warehouse district right next to the train station, so Artemy goes to see him first. Bad Grief fills Artemy in on the death of his father, informing him that Isidor Barak was the much-loved person killed overnight. He also offers to hide Artemy away in the warehouses, so as to avoid the people hunting him, believing him guilty of patricide. After Artemy turns him down, Bad Grief tells him more about the violence and vigilante attacks occurring across the town, and asks him to look in on one of his men, Piecework, who has been stabbed. Grief equips Artemy with a scalpel and other necessities, and sends him on his way. Leaving the warehouses, Artemy is approached by a man named Whistler. He tells Artemy that someone who looks like him is thought to be a killer, and that people in town believe that the same person who killed the 3 people at the train station have also killed Simon Kane, the patriarch of the Kane family. Whistler, though, knows that Artemy is not responsible for Simon's death, as Whistler is the train driver who brought Artemy to town. Curiously, the train driver says that Artemy was his only living human passenger, and that there was no one else on the train with him. He also tells Artemy that the train drivers and the ferrymen will help Artemy. On the way to see Piecework, and very near to the house where he is holed up, Artemy comes across 2 men standing over the body of a stepwoman who has been murdered. The 2 men say it wasn't them, but it was other people, who believed her to be a step abomination. Upon reaching Piecework, Artemy is informed by his companion that Piecework was stabbed due to attacking a woman who he thought was a Shabnakadir, who he thought, or at least claimed to think, was responsible for Isidor's death. Regardless of his crimes, Artemy performs surgery on Piecework, removing a bloody lockpick from his belly, and goes to leave, but is met with a tragedian who suggests he loot the place first. Artemy does, and then returns to Bad Grief to tell him that Piecework has been patched up. Leaving the warehouse again, Artemy is met with Var, an odd man who offers to buy organs from him, and apparently had a similar arrangement with Artemy's father. Having reconnected with one of his old friends, Artemy then seeks out another, Stanislav Rubin, who had become Isidor's apprentice. Rubin isn't home, but Daniil Denkovsky is there, and introduces himself to Artemy, telling Artemy that he had to convince Rubin that Artemy did not kill his father. Daniil also foreshadows that he expects more death to come, as a very deadly visitor had arrived in town. Daniil does not feel the need to elaborate on this. As Artemy is leaving Rubin's house, he is met with 2 children who ask for his help. They belong to the child gang the Souls and a Halves, and they tell him that their friends have been poisoned and need a doctor, and also that there will be a trial that they want Artemy to help with. Artemy agrees to help them both, but first he goes back upstairs to ask Daniil why the hell he, as a doctor, has refused to help 3 poisoned children. Daniil simply explains that he considers such things as not being worth his time. Rushing to the warehouse district, Artemy goes to the Souls and a Half's hideout and finds that he was too late to save the poison victims, and also learns that they were dogs, not children, but no less important to the Souls and a Halves. He also learns that the poisoner was Laika, the child he had met at the station, who had been kind to him. Notkin, the leader of the gang, asks Artemy if killing is ever justified, and speaks with him about Laika's crimes. Artemy offers to help with the situation with Laika, and Notkin gives him a leash, instructing him to give it to Laika, that he'll know what it means. Artemy finds Laika in the steppe, and has a choice on how to deal with him: to kill him, let him go, or to give him that leash. Artemy decides to let the Soul and a Halves deal with their own in their own way, and gives him the leash. When Artemy returns to the Soul and a Halves hideout, he finds Laika's mental state to be somewhat changed. Notkin also tells Artemy that there was another witness to him arriving in town after Isidor's time of death, the orphan girl Murky. Artemy has a brief conversation with Murky, but right now she's unwilling to open up to him. Having helped the children and with Reuben nowhere to be found, Artemy makes his way to the home of Lara Ravel. She welcomes him, telling him to eat something and then rest. Artemy does so and has a disturbing dream, seeing the 3 men that he killed at the station, and their reflections, who tell him about who these men were. Artemy is then given the opportunity to see if he can change their fates. Artemy can choose to defy fate and to let them kill him, but doing so will leave him severely injured upon waking. When Artemy does wake up, it is to Lara telling him that there is an intruder upstairs. Artemy goes to investigate and meets the changeling Clara, who calls him a ripper, and tells him that he will drown his hometown in blood. She urges him to do nothing, to lay low and to let her handle things in her own glorious way. Artemy returns to Lara and tells her about Clara being upstairs, but Lara decides to let her be. Leaving Lara's house before 8 p.m, Artemy is met with 3 off-hours prompters who chide him for moving through events too quickly and telling him that the next event in his life won't occur until that evening, and that he should spend the rest of the day exploring the town and filling his pockets. Artemy takes this advice and heads into town, but not before speaking with the stepwoman nearby, who teaches him how to draw herbs from the earth with blood. Another stepwoman runs up to Artemy at midday and speaks with him as though he should know her, but he can't place her. She tells him that he will remember her and that she will come and find him again. Artemy makes his way to his father's house, finding a crowd outside standing vigil, and meeting Sticky, another child who, like Murky, doesn't feel like opening up to Artemy right now. Nearby to Isidor's house, Artemy comes across another stepwoman who is also being put to death by a mob, still looking for a Shabnaka deer. Artemy again finds more death nearby at the Locked Termitary, the building that houses the kin who work in the town. A crowd is outside looking up at a woman who falls from a window. A man in the crowd says that she would have just been trying to leave the locked building. Near the middle of town, Artemy comes across another member of the kin, who offers to sell him a special talking bull for 300 coins. The bull's owner tells him that the bull spoke to him and told him that money is going to become very important, which is why the man is now selling the bull for some coin. Artemy is intrigued and agrees to buy the bull after negotiating the price down to 200. As Artemy continues to explore the town, he passes by the town hall building and decides to meet with Alexander Saburov, the governor of the town, who is also leading the investigation into his father's death. Alexander does not wish to speak with Artemy, instead immediately locking up as a suspect until 8 p.m. when a guard releases him due to Big Vlad, the patriarch of the powerful Logimsky family and a friend of the Barak family, vouching for him. Big Vlad would like to see Artemy and so has sent a messenger who intercepts Artemy on his way out of the town hall. Artemy goes to see Big Vlad at his home, and he welcomes Artemy back to town and offers Artemy to stay with him in his home. He also explains to Artemy that his father is likely due to be buried in the morning, and suggests to Artemy that he go to the Broken Heart pub to drink to his father's memory. Artemy takes this suggestion and heads to the pub where he meets the Stomartin brothers, Peter and Andre, the creators of an impossible structure in the town called the Polyhedron that stands near the cathedral and is filled with the town's children, who can apparently see things in the polyhedron that adults cannot see. Later that night, after the clock strikes midnight, Artemy finds himself drawn to an advertisement for the local theatre, which lights up when he approaches. Intrigued, Artemy goes to the theatre and sees himself on stage being directed by Mark Immortal. Mark is advising Artemy not to ever die, as doing so will permanently wound the world. Mark is also telling the onstage Artemy's fate, that he will find a happy ending, that he will even believe he has won. After the stage lights go down, Artemy approaches Mark, who tells him this play is about death, that it has been tried before, but none of the actors knew their roles. This time it will be different. Mark will take this study from the stage and see it play out in the streets. Leaving the theatre, Artemy becomes aware that the dead item shop is now open. This is a shop that Artemy finds is run by his fellow traveller, who trades useful items for dead items, things that most people throw away. With nothing else to do, Artemy makes his way back to the Ogimsky residence for the night. In the morning, Artemy heads to the cemetery to see his father put to rest. The burial isn't going well, however, as the earth isn't accepting Isidor's body. Grace, the daughter of the caretaker, and now the sole carer of the cemetery after the passing of her parents, believes that it is because his life was cut short and he was not able to finish something important. He also says that the kin will burn Isidor's body if the earth won't accept him. The only positive to the earth not accepting Isidor is that this means that Artemy still has the opportunity to investigate his father's body and check it for clues as to his killer. Artemy observes that Isidor's chest had been punctured with something massive and cone-shaped, a horn or a claw maybe. Pulling away the cloth covering Isidor's body, Artemy is also able to see the condition of his skin. It is dry to the touch, suspicious, with an unusual degree of cirrhosis unexplained by his age. Finally, Artemy sees that there is soil underneath Isidor's fingernails, which Artemy knows is very unlike Isidor, who would always keep his hands clean. Pulling away from his father's body, Artemy speaks with the members of the kin. Presented with the choice of accepting his father's duty as his own, or abandoning this duty and seeing his father burn, Artemy pledges himself to continuing his father's work. With this, the earth accepts Isidor, and Artemy is directed to speak with Abattoir concerning his inheritance. Following Abattoir back to her house, Artemy is given his father's Abattoir, containing a number of items including a list of names. 7 are names of children in the town, and the 8th is a sigil that Artemy does not recognize. Abattoir does recognize the sigil as a sigil used to mark cattle and means something like a big body or a body that contains a lot, though in this context, she does not know what Isidor was referring to. Abattoir can tell him, however, that his father spent most of his last days with the children on that list. Artemy knows some of the children on the list already, and goes to speak with one of them to see if they know what the list is about. They in turn direct him to speak with Capella, Big Vlad's daughter and the de facto leader of the children in the town. As Artemy approaches Capella's wing of the Ogimsky residence, he sees some children outside performing a burial of their own, and he helps them build the shallowest of graves. After this funeral is also over, Artemy heads inside to see Capella. She tells him that Isidor believed that the children on the list would be the ones to remake and rebuild the town. Capella didn't know why Isidor believed this, but she supposes that he must have known of some coming catastrophe. After leaving Capella, Artemy is approached by a woman who wants to trade with him, and explains that trading items is an important part of belonging to the town, that as they trade, they share with each other, get to know one another, and for Artemy, who has returned after so long, trade will help them remember him, accept him, and even love him. Artemy takes her advice and trades with the townspeople. In doing so, he speaks with some of the children, who tell him that Tychik, one of the children on his list, is in the termitary, while Khan, another of the children, is in the polyhedron. With the termitary locked down and the polyhedron closed to adults, both Tyre and Khan are out of Artemy's reach for now. However, he also learned from Clara that one of the children he can reach may be in danger. She says that Grace at the cemetery has the ability to speak with the dead, but that this ability may be killing her. Artemy goes to speak with Grace about Clara's concerns and Grace confirms that she can communicate with the dead, and says she has spoken with Isidor. She says that Isidor is in pain as though a friend killed him, and that he is sad he did not get to see Artemy, but nothing would have changed, even if Artemy had made it to town on time. Grace can give Artemy the chance to hear his father speak, and if Artemy accepts, he will hear his father speak of regretting not doing something during the last outbreak, and of how his heart aches for those that will die, but they could not keep living the old ways. It seems that Isidor is not speaking to Artemy, but to someone else when he says these things. He does not seem to be aware of Artemy's presence at all. Leaving Grace's shed, Artemy sees the orphan girl Murky outside in the cemetery. Murky also believes that she can hear the voices of the dead, and offers to show Artemy how. He accepts her offer, and she leads him out into the steppe and directs him to collect herbs. Once he has the herbs, he asks her what he is meant to do, and she says it is just a matter of closing his eyes and wanting it really hard. Artemy understands that this is just the fantasy of a child who has lost her parents, and he leaves her be to return to the town. Back in town, a townsperson tells Artemy that Saburov is hiring patrolmen at the town hall. Artemy goes to try and speak with Saburov again, and this time, instead of locking Artemy up, he gives him a key to Isidor's house. Artemy goes to Isidor's house and sorts through his father's belongings. He finds a key with a note signed V.O. He also finds a plague cloud in one of the rooms on the second floor. Going to leave, he then finds that Clara has also let himself in after him, saying she wanted to pay her respects. Outside, he runs into Daniil, who intends to investigate the house, and he asks if Artemy knows what the strange mold on the house is. Artemy doesn't know what Daniil is talking about, but when he turns to look at the house again, he sees that it is now covered in red, scab-like patches, as are the neighbouring buildings. There are also people now looking at the scabs on these buildings, and children contemplating that the buildings are sick. Not knowing what to make of these patches, Artemy goes to find the building his new key unlocks, and on the way comes across a group of kin outside the still locked termitary. One of them asks Artemy to speak with Big Vlad on their behalf, to see if he will agree to unlock the termitary. Artemy agrees to do this, but ultimately Big Vlad refuses. While speaking with Big Vlad, Artemy asks him about the key he found, and whether it was from him since it was signed V.O. Big Vlad says it wasn't him, and that he intends to investigate who the key was from. Artemy will later meet Vlad the Younger, and realize that it was this other Vlad Olgimsky that had left his father the note. Heading back towards the factory district, Artemy decides to check in on Ruben and to try and talk to him. Even though Ruben no longer believes Artemy killed Isidor directly, he still holds him at least partly responsible for his death, due to Artemy not returning to town earlier. Ruben does not believe Artemy deserves his inheritance, instead believing that if anyone was to take over from Isidor, it should be Ruben himself, since Ruben was the one in town, working with Isidor as his apprentice. Lara had also come to speak with Ruben about his attitude towards Artemy, but she does agree with him that Artemy should not accept his inheritance. She tells Artemy that when the first outbreak struck 5 years ago, it infected the crude sprawl, and Isidor ordered that the crude sprawl be sealed and that no one was allowed to leave. The result was the end of the outbreak, but also the deaths of everyone in that district, including everyone who was healthy, before Isidor gave the order to lock them in with the sick. Lara worries about Artemy becoming the type of person who could make the same choice, and tells Artemy that if he becomes another Isidor, the town will never rest, and they will never know peace. While Artemy listens to what Lara says, he has already accepted his father's duties, and he leaves Ruben's house to make his way to his father's hidden workshop. Passing back through the factory district, Artemy finds this workshop and unlocks it with the key from his father's house. Inside he finds workbenches and apparatuses, one for mixing tinctures from herbs, and the other for brewing medicines, both of which are currently broken. He also finds Sticky, who says he used to come here with Isidor and learnt from and worked with him. Artemy looks around and finds that the cabinet has a spring and piece of metal scrap that he can use to fix the alembic. As soon as it is fixed, Artemy imagines a conversation with his tumbler toy and uses it to imagine what his father would say, thinking his father would tell him that he should live in the lair and continue their work. He also remembers the things that his father taught him about using the alembic to create tinctures and how to use them to increase immunity and to diagnose symptoms of disease. along with using morphine to reduce pain and antibiotics to treat the actual illness. Coming back to himself, he finds Sticky has been trying to get his attention and is asking if the apparatus works. Artemy confirms that he was able to fix the alembic, but the brewery will require a special toolkit, which Sticky offers to keep an eye out for. Leaving the lair, Artemy finds that the bull he purchased the day before has been delivered, though for now it doesn't seem to want to say anything. Wandering back through the town, Artemy speaks with a child who said that there were children waiting for him in the bridge square, as they thought he would be stopping by to see the judge. These children tell Artemy about a game they play, the loot cache game. There are loot caches throughout the town, and the idea is to find one and take something from it, and then leave something in return. They will let Artemy play because there is another adult already playing, and this person, they believe, killed Isidor. Artemy seeks out some of the caches, and eventually finds one with a note directing the reader to a playground. There he finds children who challenge him to a game of hide and seek. Artemy accepts and is able to trade with the children as he finds them, obtaining a schmauder from one of them. In the evening, Artemy passes by the station and sees another group of children practicing train summoning, a practice based on a belief that one can call a train if they just imagine and focus hard enough. Artemy follows their instructions and heads out to one of the train lines in the steppe and attempts to summon a train. He does end up hearing the sound of a train arriving, but does not see one actually appear. Returning to the town, Artemy heads to the theatre for the night's pantomime. He sees himself on the stage with Clara and Daniil. Clara speaks of her ability to perform miracles, to heal with the touch of her hands. Daniil espouses the virtues of modern medicine. Stage Artemy speaks of local medicine, which may seem backwards but does work at times. Two executors watch from the side and criticize the three for their attempts to impress one another, telling them that nothing will help them here. Going home to the lair for the night, Artemy finds the same herb bride who had approached him the day prior, waiting for him. She again asks if he remembers her, but he does not. She tells him that he once told her that he dreamt of salt, which surprises Artemy because he doesn't remember ever telling anyone that. The herb bride doesn't tell him anything further, just that she does not hold a grudge, and asks that when Artemy remembers, that he won't hold a grudge either. Going to bed, Artemy then dreams of the children on his father's list. He sees them standing before a door in the middle of the field. Behind them on the ledge are the two strange children who had watched Artemy on the doomed 12th day. They are named Measly and Thrush. Artemy speaks of one of the strange children, asking who they are, and they only say, "We're watching, observing. No time for games now. We must watch." They are contemplating which of the other children will go through the door first. Artemy goes through the door, not sure if he'll find his father or the 8th on his list on the other side. Instead, he wakes. By the time Artemy wakes on day 3, the plague has already started to take hold, finding roots in the Tanners, the hindquarters, and the Skinners districts. From now on, Artemy will find that the plague has infected different areas of the town each day. In the early morning, Artemy goes to Aspetti's house and speaks with a number of the kin inside who had gone there to seek her guidance. He also meets with a man who had asked him to intercede with Big Vlad the day before and can return his money to him. At 7:30, Artemy decides to check in on Lara and heads to her house. She is in a very bad mood and has been visited by Artemy's strange herb bride. Artemy suggests that the 4 old friends, Lara, Bad Grief, Reuben, and himself, should meet up that evening like they did in the old days. Lara isn't thrilled at the idea, but she agrees to meet. Going to the warehouses, Artemy finds that Grief is also in a bit of a mood, caught up in blaming himself for the actions of the thugs that are attacking people at night. Grief takes some time convincing, but he too agrees to attend the night's get-together. Artemy next starts to head over to the Kane's residences, but stops in to visit Big Vlad. After seeing a crowd of people outside his home, they are angry about the closing of the factory and are seeking answers. Big Vlad has no desire to answer any questions about the factory, but he does want to tell Artemy that the Kanes are planning to take Isidor's house, and that Artemy should go and see the judge urgently to assert his claim. With now 2 reasons to go to the Kane's residence, Artemy makes his way over there. Artemy finds Reuben in Maria Kane's rooms. He asks Reuben why he is there, and Reuben says that he had come to autopsy Simon Kane's body, as Simon had died the same night as Isidor. The autopsy is done, but now the body is missing. Reuben, though, is content to leave finding the body to the Kanes. Artemy tells Reuben to meet him, Lara, and Bad Grief that night. Going back downstairs, Artemy runs into Maria Kane, who is not well pleased to see Artemy in her rooms and kicks him out. He then goes to see the judge about his father's house. Georgi immediately says that now he has seen Artemy, he relinquishes all claims on the house, and it is Artemy's. All that Artemy need do is pass a decree to the prefect of the hindquarters district. Artemy goes to the hindquarters and finds that it is infected. A guardsman tells Artemy that Daniil has ordered no one is to enter the infected districts, but that there is an exception for Artemy. He finds the prefect's building and finds that everyone inside is dead, apart from the prefect, who accepts the decree. Isidor's house now belongs to Artemy. At 11 a.m, one of Notkin's Solana halves tracks Artemy down to ask him to come to the hideout, as one of their gang has come down with something nasty. Artemy goes over and finds Abattoir outside, counseling Artemy not to try and heal the boy as he will fail. Artemy does not listen and goes inside to do what he can. He speaks with Notkin and is told that Daniil had left a message for Artemy, not to bother with the child and to come see him instead. Notkin also gives Artemy some antibiotics that the kids have found, in the hopes that it will help the child. Patches. Clara has also come to the hideout and can sense that Artemy has a schmauder on him and warns him not to bother using it on Patches. Artemy examines Patches and uses his tinctures to diagnose him before giving him an antibiotic. Artemy reports to Notkin that it is too soon to tell if Patches will pull through. Upon leaving the Solana House fortress, he runs into Sticky, who asks when he will be coming back to the lair. Artemy decides to stop by and finds a group of kin outside, who now recognizes Artemy as a healer. Inside, Abattoir is waiting for Artemy as well, and due to his actions with treating the child, she acknowledges Artemy as the true heir of Isidor. Artemy then goes to visit Daniil at the Stillwater, the home of Avian. Outside the Stillwater is a group of orderlies dressed as executors. They say they are volunteers, and that Daniil had asked them to don those outfits and come see him. But he hasn't come out yet, so he must be busy, and they don't want to disturb him. Artemy is less concerned about disturbing the venerable bachelor who leaves children to die, so he heads inside. He finds Ava, who says that Daniil isn't there, that he has gone to an important meeting of doctors at the town hall. Artemy checks upstairs anyway, much to Ava's annoyance, but Daniil really isn't there. Artemy heads back outside and hears the town hall bell ringing. Prompters now line the streets all the way back to the town hall. He follows their directions, finding along the way that the town has taken its first step in managing the plague, the ordering of numerous coffins, which are inexplicably left in the streets. Entering the town hall, Artemy is stopped by Big Vlad, who would really prefer Artemy leave the plague to others and simply serve as the Ilgimsky personal doctor. Artemy insists on speaking with the others at the meeting, and speaks first with Daniil, who wants Artemy to serve as his assistant. However, Artemy and Daniil have different goals. Daniil wants a vaccine to prevent the spread of the plague beyond the town, whereas Artemy wants to save the town, the sick included. Also at the meeting is Ruben, who urges Artemy to leave seeking revenge for Isidor to him, as Ruben is better at dissecting people, but the making of infusions requires Artemy's hands, so Artemy should focus on taking up Isidor's work. The others at the meeting have their own tasks and opinions. Vlad the Younger has been given the job of securing provisions. Victor Kane has decreed that the theatre will be set up as a hospital. Alexander Sabarov will recruit volunteers to secure the streets. Katerina Sabarova thinks all efforts are useless. After speaking with everyone, Artemy finds that Georgi has entered the town hall. He speaks with him as well, and Georgi confirms that the plague is spreading across the lower town. Georgi's concern for now is the two architects, Andrei and Peter Stomartin, who live in the lower town, and who are the geniuses behind the miraculous polyhedron. Georgi asks Artemy to check in on Peter at his lodge and Andrei at his pub. Peter's lodge is in an infected district, so Artemy gives him a tincture to boost his immunity. Peter then asks that Artemy also check in on Anna Angel, a performer also living in the infected district. Artemy obliges and gives Anna a tincture as well, before heading to the Broken Heart pub to see Andrei. Artemy confirms that Andrei is healthy and not in immediate danger, but on the way out sees Notkin talking with another boy, and stops to check in with him as well. The other boy is Khan, the youngest of the Kanes, and the leader of the children in the polyhedron. He and Notkin are planning to investigate the rumor about a house of death. The rumor says that when Death comes to town, he stays in an abandoned house, but if the abandoned house is found before midnight, and all the candles are lit, or if someone stays in the house until dawn, then death will be stalled. Artemy does not want the children going to this house, but says he will check it out himself. He then returns to his lair to rest until after dark. That night, Artemy seeks out the House of Death and finds an abandoned house in the crude sprawl. The moment he enters the house, the door locks behind him. He finds Notkin and Khan upstairs. With the three of them locked in, Artemy decides to try lighting all the candles in the house, in keeping with the legend. He moves through the house, lighting each of the candles while being targeted by an entity which appears on the walls, attacking his immunity. Once all the candles are lit, the door unlocks and Artemy tells Notkin and Khan that they should all leave. As a result of Artemy defeating the House of Death, the crude sprawl escapes infection the following day. Notkin, however, is not as fortunate and appears to have become infected from his time in the house. Artemy then goes to see the night's pantomime, which consists of the executors Talon and Beak talking about the havoc the plague will create and how there is just over a week left. Finally, for that night, Artemy makes his way over to the meeting with Lara, Reuben and Grief. They have all kept their word on attending, and the friends are able to make some peace between them. The next morning, Sticky tells Artemy that he knows where to get a toolkit, that there is a guy in the atrium who owes him, and they will be able to get one from him. Artemy agrees to meet Sticky by this guy's shop later that day. Leaving the lair, Artemy is approached by a messenger from Alexander Saburov. Saburov has apparently found Isidor's killer and is currently interrogating him. Artemy tells the messenger to let Saburov know he is on his way. Artemy does start to head towards Saburov's residence, but is distracted by the sound of a piano playing from inside a house. It seems out of place, so Artemy investigates, finding Capella standing over a now silent piano. Capella says that the song which was playing was her mother's favourite melody, and she hears it sometimes, but never finds anyone playing it. She wonders if it is the spirit of her mother, and asks Artemy to investigate if he ever hears the melody again. Artemy will hear the melody again 3 times, finding firstly a factory worker who played the melody without ever playing before, then a child who won't tell him anything, and finally Clara, who has also been tasked with searching for Capella's mother, but who tells Artemy that it is not Victoria's spirit, and when asked if there is such a thing as an immortal soul, says that Artemy does not want to know the answer, and that it is best to live in hope. Artemy takes this to heart and lets Capella believe that it is her mother's spirit playing the pianos throughout the town. That diversion aside, Artemy then makes it to Saburov's house, where he has been interrogating the suspect, a member of the kin who Saburov says was with Isidor on the night he was killed. Speaking with the man himself, Artemy learns that the suspect did see Isidor that night, going into the steppe with Simon Kane and digging a hole in the ground. The suspect told the overseer of the termitary, Overseer Tychik, and he and the other elders of the kin ran into the steppe after Isidor. The suspect doesn't know what happened to Isidor after that, just that Tychik then returned to the termitary, and the termitary has been locked down ever since. Artemy tells Saburov to let the suspect go, but Saburov says that isn't up to Artemy. Leaving Saburov to his investigation, Artemy heads towards the town hall to collect his provisions, but on the way he hears a baby crying in the Chine district. Artemy investigates and finds a baby in an infected house, with Anna Angel standing over it. She has been looking for babies as an order has come down that says that anyone who saves a baby from a plague house gets their sins absolved. The only problem is that Anna doesn't actually want to touch the kid, and Artemy doesn't really trust her anyway, so he decides to take the child to the town hall. At the town hall, he delivers the baby to a woman who is looking after children orphaned by the plague. He also picks up his revisions from the public fund organised by Vlad the Younger. As access to the fund and Artemy's responsibility as a doctor both require him to work in the hospital each day, that is where Artemy goes next. Reuben is there and tells Artemy his job for the day is to alleviate the suffering of the afflicted, which he does by giving them morphine. Artemy also takes the opportunity to take blood and organs from those who died of the plague, for use in his serums once the brewery in the lair is fixed. Lara Ravel is also at the hospital wanting to help, but Artemy tells her the best thing she can do is go home. He promises that he will come and see her in about an hour or so, and that is what he does after finishing his shift at the hospital. Since Lara wasn't able to help at the hospital, she is wanting to set up a shelter at her home for people to wait out the plague. But she has a problem. Access to water is limited, and she wants Artemy to bring her a water barrel. Artemy goes to look for a barrel, but his search is interrupted by two messengers. One is from Vlad the Younger, who wants Artemy to come see him, and the other is a do-gooder who wanted Artemy to know that looters have broken into his father's house. Rushing over to Isidor's house, Artemy finds the first of the looters outside. The looter attacks Artemy, and Artemy is forced to eliminate him. Expecting the same from the looters inside, Artemy is able to sneak up on two of them, but is forced to fight the last head-on. When all the looters are eliminated and the house secured, Artemy leaves and goes to the vacant house occupied by Vlad the Younger to see what he wanted to discuss. Inside he finds Vlad with a group of kin. Vlad has dug a well, which Artemy objects to, though Vlad is not interested in his opinion. What Vlad is interested in, though, is Artemy's opinion on whether the Udong, the worm-like members of the kin, are immune to the plague as they are claiming to be. Artemy speaks with the Udong, who explain that they are part earth and part flesh, so that which is no threat to the earth is no threat to them, and the disease created by the earth cannot touch them. Artemy considers what they say, but there is no evidence at this stage to say if it is true or not, and he conveys this to Vlad the Younger. Leaving the house to look into the water situation, he is stopped again, this time by one of Notkin's gang, who say they are working on something for him. Meaning to check in on Notkin anyway after their time in the House of Death, Artemy goes over to the Solana House fortress and speaks with the kid outside, who reveals they are working on maps of the infected districts for Artemy. Artemy doesn't like the kids risking becoming infected, but the maps will help, so he accepts. Heading into the hideout, Artemy sees that Notkin did indeed become infected in the House of Death. Fortunately, he is able to cure him by using one of the Shrouders. Leaving the fortress, Artemy is confronted by a figure wearing an executor costume, who berates him for saving Notkin, telling Artemy that he can't hold him at bay forever, and he will return for Notkin and for all of those on Artemy's list. He also mentions that the children only matter as long as they are of use to the Eighth, that the goal is the Eighth. With this strange encounter over, Artemy thinks that he should talk to Reuben and Aspity about the Eighth, the Isidor. Neither are particularly helpful, though Aspity does say that the Isidor means a body that contains a world, and Reuben gives Artemy the idea of checking with Vlad the Younger, who is known to be interested in steppe folklore. With little time remaining in the day, Artemy decides to check in with Vlad in the morning, and in the meantime to focus on locating the water for Lara and meeting Sticky in the atrium to recover the toolkit. Artemy finds that the water barrels are accompanied by guards, who tell Artemy that there has been an order from Diurnal that all the water barrels need to be examined, and if there is anything suspicious found in them, then all the barrels from that part of the town are to be seized. Artemy examines one of the barrels and finds nothing wrong with it, but upon examining a second, finds that there is some contaminant in the water. Worried that it may be infected, Artemy takes a sample of the water to Diurnal to examine it. Finding Diurnal in the town hall, Artemy is told that a well-wisher had reported that someone was intentionally infecting the water barrels. Diurnal had thought this was nonsense, but is alarmed to see the sample Artemy has taken, and decides that he must treat all the Midtown barrels as though they are infected, and order that they all be destroyed. Artemy reports to Lara that unfortunately she will not be receiving a water barrel, and in so doing unknowingly protects the flank from becoming infected the next day. Finally making his way to the atrium, Artemy meets up with Sticky, who reveals that while the storekeeper does have a toolkit, Sticky intends to take it by less than legal means, if Artemy can distract the storekeeper for long enough. While Artemy is not thrilled about becoming an accomplice, he does need that toolkit, so heads into the shop to distract the owner, while Sticky lifts the toolkit from the storeroom. He then meets Sticky back outside, and they take the toolkit back to the lair. Artemy finds Murky is outside the lair, and that she wants him to come with her to look for more grasses, and to stop by the train car that she is living in later. Artemy invites Murky to move into the lair, and she does agree to live with him for a tiny bit, if he promises to get some food. Entering the lair, Artemy then sees a vision of all the children on his list, including Murky, hanging and dead. Beside them is the figure that had confronted Artemy after he cured Notkin. It taunts Artemy, saying that this is a vision of what is to come. When the vision fades, Artemy finally fixes the brewery. He combines tinctures and infected organs in the brewery, and leaves it to brew while he goes to the theatre. This time the pantomime is the two executors, Talon and Beak, discussing Artemy and his father. The father having made severe decisions, a sawbone who broke apart bones that grew wrong, and the sun trying to put them back together. After the pantomime ends, Artemy leaves the theatre and walks back through the town. He runs into one of the Yodong, who is talking about how his people are looking for Reuben. Going to Reuben's apartment, Artemy finds 2 more Yodong also looking for him. It turns out that Bad Grief, though he does not directly admit it, has hidden Reuben away in the warehouse district to keep him safe from the members of the kin who are hunting him. Artemy finds Reuben, who is working on something in secret. He doesn't tell Artemy what he is working on, or why he is being hunted, but asks for his help. Artemy agrees and goes outside to confront the Yodong. There are 4 of them in the warehouse district, and Artemy eliminates them all in order to protect his friend. With Reuben safe for now, Artemy returns home to the lair for the night. Next morning, the medicine Artemy was brewing is ready, and as soon as he collects it, he finds the strange figure, the embodiment of the plague, has appeared again, questioning his intentions and telling him that a mixture made from human guts won't work, as human bodies are too weak. Artemy tells the entity that he will find something that works, and the entity disappears. Before leaving the lair, Artemy speaks with Sticky and asks if he saw the entity, but he didn't. Sticky also mentions, however, that he has been approached by a chemist and offered a job helping to hide bodies for those who don't want to surrender their dead. Artemy is concerned about the prospect of people keeping the bodies of plague victims, so he tells Sticky that he will look into it. Upstairs, Artemy finds Murky, who has a new friend who doesn't like Artemy because he is a doctor. Not knowing what to make of this conversation, Artemy leaves Murky to it and heads outside. Outside the lair, Artemy runs into the herb bride again, who finally tells Artemy that her name is Nara. Artemy still doesn't remember her, and she says it doesn't matter. The important thing is that now he has gotten to know her, so that when the time comes, he won't be scared. She also finally tells him that the time will come when he will kill her. Seeking out the chemist that had approached Sticky, Artemy finds him quite uncooperative, as he has taken the Kane's lack of action against him as approval, and believing he is acting with the Kane's consent, he will not stop. Artemy does not believe that the Kanes would approve and goes to speak to Victor. Victor apparently had no idea what the chemist was doing, and he asks Artemy to find houses where the dead have been hidden as proof. Artemy finds a number of suspect houses. In the first house are 2 men that act aggressively towards Artemy when he attempts to investigate. Artemy is forced to eliminate them and finds that they were hiding a man who appears to be sick, but the illness is not the sand plague. The second house is occupied by Maria Kana, who has already condemned the house, but for apparently no other reason than that she did not like it. Artemy tells her that he is going to tell her father Victor about this, a sentiment of which she does not approve. Finally, Artemy finds a house that is as silent as a grave. Going inside, he finds 3 bodies. He heads back outside to mark the door and is interrupted by a woman who begs him not to, and promises that they will bury the dead that night at the cemetery. Artemy knows that leaving the corpses there is too risky, and could lead to the whole district succumbing to the infection, if they were left. He marks the door and returns to Victor. With those bodies as proof, Victor is able to resolve the issue, and the Bridge Square district will not be infected the following day. In the afternoon, Artemy comes across Clara, who is worried about her adoptive parents, the Sabarovs. Artemy goes to check on them and finds a number of townspeople outside, who accuse the Sabarovs of harboring a carrier of the plague, an urchin girl who sounds a lot like Clara, or Murky. Alexander Sabarov asks Artemy to send these people away. He does not believe that Clara is the carrier. Artemy speaks to the group again and tells them that if there is a carrier, then they may be the answer to the plague, as their blood could be the basis for a cure. After leaving the Sabarovs, Artemy decides to check in with Khan. He has heard from some of the children in the town that Khan has been staying in a building called the Nutshell. Khan tells Artemy that he will be staying in the town, as he does not wish to risk spreading the disease back in the polyhedron. Also in the Nutshell is one of Khan's loyal dogheads, who wants to trade a Schmauder for the leash Artemy received from Notkin. Artemy needs as many Schmauders as he can get, so he agrees. Leaving the Nutshell, Artemy hears another baby crying from an infected house. He goes inside and finds both Anna Angel and a stepwoman, both wanting to take the child. He decides that the safest choice is simply to deliver the child to the town hall himself. After delivering the baby to the town hall, Artemy stops in at the hospital for his shift. Today he is tasked with prescribing medicine to plague victims. He uses the medicine he brewed the day before, and finds that while it does lower infection in the same way as a normal antibiotic, it is not a cure. Dejected over his failure, Artemy stops by the Broken Heart pub. There he meets Daniil, and they talk at each other about their respective failures. Artemy does not have a cure, and Daniil has not created a vaccine. With Artemy's attempts at creating a serum having come to a dead end, he goes back to following his only other lead, and checks in with Vlad the Younger. He asks Vlad about the 8th on his father's list. Vlad believes the Isidor is a bull marked for slaughter, and he tells Artemy that there is one such bull being paraded through the town, in preparation for a ritual occurring later today. Artemy finds the bull being escorted through the hindquarters district by a group of kin. They ask him to meet them at the Ruggy Barrow that evening, and to perform the sacrifice with the bull. Artemy agrees, and he meets them that evening, finding the bull on the altar and cutting the lines. In return, he is able to take some meat from the bull, and the Udong also give Artemy a vial of blood, and tells him that bulls are immune to the plague. He also mentions that some learned fool believes that bulls were the source of the disease. Artemy takes the vial of blood to Daniil and talks with him about the bulls. Daniil had tried experimenting with a bull, injecting it with the plague to see its immune response, but the animal then went missing. Daniil takes the vial of blood to examine it, telling Artemy it will take a few hours. After midnight, Artemy seeks out Reuben again to check that he is still okay, and to see if he will now tell Artemy what he has been working on. He sees 3 members of the kin outside Reuben's hideout, and finds a despondent Reuben inside. He tells Artemy that he was working on a vaccine for Daniil, but that the resource he was using is depleted, and the vaccine ultimately was a failure, offering only temporary protection. He again asks Artemy's help to avoid the kin outside. Artemy goes outside and leads the kin away, giving Reuben time to escape. While it is not explicitly said what the resource was that Reuben was using, it almost certainly was the body of Simon Kane, whose body had gone missing after Reuben's autopsy. With Reuben safe again, Artemy goes to the theatre and sees himself on stage with Daniil and Clara, with both men telling Clara that they don't like her, which frustrates Mark Immortal that they would be wasting their time on such things. With the night's pantomime over, Artemy seeks out the fellow traveller at the dead item shop. This time, the fellow traveller speaks with Artemy cryptically about selling unborn things, and offering him candy wrappers for trade that are of no value as of right now. Before retiring for the night, Artemy goes back to see Daniil again to check how his investigation of the bull blood is going. Daniil tells Artemy that the bulls do have antibodies against the plague, but it is useless, as the sand pest mutates in human blood in a way it doesn't in bull blood, as the bull blood destroys it too quickly. What they need to create a cure is a creature that is half human and half bull, a creature that doesn't exist. With this, Artemy leaves Daniil and returns to the lair. That night he dreams of Taya Tychik, who claims to be the one that is dreaming of Artemy. Artemy asks Taya if she knows what the Abattoir is, and she says it reminds her of a tale, or riddle, which goes, "The Abattoir has a special mound, his ear sticking from the ground. Just make a wish and grab the mud until your hands are filled with blood." Taya tells Artemy it's about the old village, and that he should go there. When Artemy awakes, he leaves the lair with the intention of going straight to the old village, but a messenger from Saburov stops him, telling him that Saburov has caught Isidor's killer again. Again, Saburov is mistaken, though this new subject did see Isidor and Simon that night. He heard Isidor speculating that he only had 3 hours left, though Simon might hold out longer. The suspect thought that maybe they had taken poison, since they sounded like they had planned it. Saburov does not care if Artemy thinks this man is guilty or not. Instead, he just wants Artemy to check in with his wife, as she has apparently been unwell and hallucinating. Artemy visits with Katerina and finds that she has been speaking with a strange rat creature, the rat prophet who has been telling her things but won't leave her be. Artemy is not able to help Katerina, and after speaking with the rat prophet, he finds that the creature has removed him from the building. Artemy goes to the town hall to pick up his provisions for the day, and on the way he hears Victoria's piano music playing again, this time coming from the grocery store opposite town hall. He goes inside and finds Big Vlad, who tells Artemy that this store was where he had first met Victoria. Big Vlad is considering whether to repair the shop or to leave it as it is, as a memento of sorts. After giving Big Vlad his opinion, Artemy picks up his provisions and then makes his way to the hospital. Today, Artemy has to collect organs, both healthy and diseased, for use in Daniil's studies. Artemy collects 6 organs from the dead and puts them in the icebox for Daniil to collect later. Finished, Artemy is finally free to head out to the old kin village. There he finds a mound with a deep crack and a pool of blood. He is able to collect 2 vials of blood, which he takes back to the lair. He mixes tinctures with this strange blood and creates a panacea. The embodiment of the plague appears again and acknowledges that the panacea is a real cure, but counsels Artemy against using it, telling him that Artemy's father had succeeded in driving the plague away, but had come to regret that decision. Artemy does not listen and heads out to finally meet the friend Murky had been telling him about. Murky tells Artemy that he will need to stay out of sight in order for her friend to appear. Artemy is not happy about this, but agrees to step behind some rocks. Oddly enough, he finds Clara there. She says that she is protecting Murky from the plague and berates Artemy, accusing him of believing that the plague speaks to Murky and that he has come there to try and reason with it. She tells him that there is nothing to reason with. Artemy goes back to see if Murky's friend has appeared, and instead sees only the changeling. She claims that she is the real one, and that the Clara Artemy was just talking to was an imposter. Murky is nowhere to be seen, and the changeling says only that she is on her way. She offers Artemy a deal, himself for Murky. If he accepts, she says that Murky might live longer, and that Murky's friend will then talk to Artemy instead. Artemy accepts this deal and immediately becomes infected. He stumbles away into the steppe and is able to hear the voice of the plague speaking to him. Artemy takes the opportunity to test the panacea on himself and finds that it is an immediate cure. Artemy goes to look for Murky, finding her back in her train car. She asks him for his forgiveness and tells him that she will come home soon. Heading into town, Artemy passes by the train station and sees the strange children, Measly and Thrush, who tell him they have heard an Inquisitor is coming, and they don't think this is good. They want Artemy to destroy the train tracks so that the Inquisitor won't make it to town. Artemy goes to see his favourite criminal, Bad Grief, to check if he has any explosives handy. Grief does agree to help and tells Artemy to meet him at the train tracks later. Artemy has also been approached that night by a messenger from Yulia. She had summoned him to offer a warning. She has a visitor, the daughter of an Inquisitor, who told her the Inquisitor is arriving tomorrow. She tells Artemy that the Inquisitors are geniuses, but that they will trade him, Daniil and Clara, and treat them like tokens. The Inquisitor's daughter also has a warning, that the Inquisitors craft people, that the Inquisitor who comes to town will craft Artemy, make him the villain. Leaving Yulia's house, Artemy goes to see that night's pantomime, and sees it is the Inquisitor, casting judgment on the townspeople. After this, Artemy goes to meet with Bad Grief, and finds that instead of setting up explosives, he has built a bonfire. Grief does not intend to blow up anything. He both needs the railway, and believes that the Inquisitor will come regardless, and that this is not actually a bad thing. Unable to convince Grief, Artemy agrees that they can just watch the fire together. By dawn, the Inquisitor has arrived. A messenger comes for Artemy at 7:30, telling him to report to the Inquisitor at the cathedral. He goes to the cathedral and finds that there is a long queue of townspeople outside. Inside, he speaks to the Inquisitor, who says people have reported that he is working on a cure. Artemy confirms that he has made a cure, but that the ingredients are an issue, as the panacea is made from blood of a currently unknown origin. The Inquisitor directs Artemy to report his progress each day. When Artemy goes to the town hall that morning, he is given coupons. The Inquisitor has ordained that shops can no longer accept coins for food, only these coupons as a form of rationing. Artemy will find that there are a few exceptions to this, but will largely be grateful to the fellow traveller, since the candy wrappers and these coupons are one and the same. Going to the hospital for his shift, Artemy finds that Reuben is not there. In his place is an orderly, who gives him his task, locating those who are still living among the now large number of dead, so that they can be properly cared for. Artemy does so, and then goes to make sure Reuben is okay. He finds Reuben in his apartment. He is okay, just exhausted and fast asleep. Completely understandable given the circumstances. Artemy has a feeling that morning that Capella also wanted to talk to him. He goes to see her and she says that she didn't call him on purpose. She just has the ability to reach out and touch the town. She does want his help though. She is worried about Grace and asks Artemy to check on her. At the town hall, Daniil is also concerned about the situation at the cemetery, as there are too many dead, and Grace is not allowing cremation. Artemy goes to the cemetery where Grace has become overwhelmed with all of the voices of the dead. There is a large mass grave just outside the bounds of the cemetery, and there is no more room. Outside of Grace's hut is the Rat Prophet, who offers an option other than cremation. He will simply move the dead elsewhere. Whether Artemy chooses cremation or the Rat Prophet, the problem is solved. As Artemy is leaving, he meets the woman who cares for orphans from the town hall. She has come to relocate Grace into the town. Artemy is not sure about Grace being taken from her home, but decides that it is in her best interest to allow this to occur. Checking in at the town hall later, he learns that Grace will be staying with the architect, Peter Martin. While walking through the town, Artemy comes across a children's cache with a note saying that his father's killer has been found, and will be in Friday's yard when pigs fly. Artemy is also told by a townsperson that Anna has been seen throwing a sack into a river. Likely some attempt of ridding herself of trouble by drowning a mouse, in keeping with a local belief. Checking in with Anna, Artemy learns that she did a deal with a member of the kin who offered to tell her the future, but doing so required reading entrails. Now Anna has a heart that she cannot get rid of, presumably belonging to the person the kinsman killed in order to tell Anna her future. Artemy is familiar with this curse and trades the heart for a spindle, as under the curse the heart will return to Anna unless it is traded away. With no other duties in town, Artemy decides to go back to the old village to investigate the source of the blood. Instead of an answer, Artemy finds the foreman of the Abattoir, Oyan. Artemy asks him about the blood, but Oyan says it is difficult to explain, and Artemy will need to come to the Abattoir, but this will take some time to arrange. Oyan also urges Artemy to seek out the overseer Tajik in the termitary. Before leaving Oyan, Artemy invites him to stay at Isidor's house in the town, which he accepts. Artemy then goes to the termitary to seek out Tajik. He finds that the termitary is now unlocked. Inside, though, is a nightmare. The sand pest has clearly taken hold, and the building is full of the dead and the dying. The screams of the infected are constant. Artemy finds that the Inquisitor has also come to the termitary. She estimates the dead inside to 7,000. Mostly suspended in sacks. Artemy convinces the Inquisitor to leave the termitary unlocked and to allow the survivors to leave. Going upstairs, Artemy meets with Taya and tries to convince her to leave the termitary with him alone for her safety. Taya has no concept of alone and refuses to separate from the rest of the kin. In turn, the rest of the kin feel that they can't leave the termitary unless they have justice from Big Vlad for locking them in. Big Vlad refuses to come to the termitary, but when Artemy goes to leave, he finds Clara, who tells him that it was actually the younger Vlad who locked the termitary on the night of Artemy's arrival. Vlad the Younger is planning to go to the termitary to take responsibility for his actions. Artemy tells Big Vlad that his son is in danger and gives him Vlad the Younger's current location. Big Vlad sends his people to collect his son to prevent him from going to the kin. Fortunately, the kin are far less upset than expected at Artemy for doing the exact opposite of what they had asked him to do. They instead give him another task. There are dissenters amongst the kin who hate Artemy and will not follow his lead. The kin won't leave the termitary while there is dissent among them, and so Artemy is asked to kill the dissenters. Artemy does not like the idea of seeing more of the kin die, so he leaves the termitary for now to see if he can come up with a different answer. On the way to the theatre for that night's performance, Artemy hears screaming coming from one of the houses near the theatre. The door has been boarded up, and when Artemy breaks the boards and goes inside, he finds Katerina Savarova. She tells him that the townspeople have taken to locking people in infected houses as a witch trial of sorts. If they escape uninfected, they are a witch. If they get infected, they are not, but they will die. Katerina is also waiting for someone in the house and asks Artemy to leave her there. Making it to the theatre, Artemy finds that night's pantomime is the Inquisitor casting judgment again, this time sentencing traitors to death. At the station, Khan is speaking with Capella about the future, and the other children say that Artemy will be allowed to climb the polyhedron now. They tell him that he may see something or he may not. Artemy decides to go to the polyhedron in the morning. On the 8th day, Artemy goes to the hospital and is tasked with simply remaining in the hospital for an hour until he is relieved. Artemy agrees and has to avoid plague clouds and maintain his immunity in order to avoid infection. Over an hour passes, but the orderlies eventually return and Artemy's shift is over. Artemy also decides to check in with the Inquisitor since he was told to report to her daily. Outside the cathedral, he finds the body of Veronica, the Inquisitor's daughter. A farewell note on the body speaks of grief, but also gladness, that the Inquisitor that came to town was not her father. Going inside the cathedral, Artemy finds that the Inquisitor didn't really want to see him today. However, bad grief is also there and could use Artemy's help. He is in the middle of an existential crisis after having a very long discussion with the Inquisitor. Grief tells Artemy that they are puppets, toys filled with cotton and pulled by strings, not people, not alive. Grief asks Artemy to lock up his warehouse and to tell his men to scatter. Artemy is worried by Grief's demeanour, but agrees to do this for his old friend. At the warehouse, Barley the butcher has seized control and is not in favour of closing up. He and his two henchmen attack Artemy, who is forced to eliminate them. Artemy then reports back to Grief, who thanks him and gives him a shotgun, since Grief, having turned his back on his old life, won't need it anymore. Before leaving the bridge square, Artemy decides to take the children up on their invitation to climb the polyhedron. He doesn't see anything in particular on the polyhedron, but does see patterns in the sky. In the afternoon, Artemy will sense that Capella wants to see him. He goes to meet her and finds her with a group of children. She tells Artemy that she, Capella, will protect the children of the town, and that she is taking them from him. She tells Artemy that she will always be his ally, but they are not friends. Throughout the day, Artemy would have come across a note in one of the children's caches, saying that Isidor's killer will be in Friday's yard at 6 p.m. Artemy goes to the yard and is attacked, but after eliminating this attacker, Artemy finds that he has a note as well, saying that the man would find a thief in Friday's yard, and instructing him to attack on sight. Angry at having been set up, Artemy goes to confront the children in the Solana House fortress. They are unrepentant, and insist that the man they set Artemy up to kill really was a murderer, since they saw him kill someone else, and, for all they know, he could have killed Isidor. After arguing with them about this, Artemy leaves and goes back into town for the night performance. This time, Artemy watches Alexander Bloch, the commander of the military, talking about the responsibility to protect people. Mark Immortal interjects, asking him what he is talking about, and reminding him that his orders are to stop the plague, his duty being the exact opposite of protecting people. He is here to kill. Bloch denounces this as a criminal order that he will not follow. By the time Artemy awakes on day 9, the army has arrived, and Commander Bloch is at the town hall. Artemy goes to meet the commander and finds Daniil and Victor Kane already there. Artemy tells the commander that he is a doctor, and that he has made a cure, but requires blood of an unknown creature, likely from the Abattoir. The commander tells Artemy that he is no longer to work in the hospital, and his only job now is to find the raw material he needs to make his serum. He lets Artemy know that his orders are to bombard the town if they do not have a large supply of the cure in 2 days. Artemy stops by the hospital, despite Bloch's comments, and he finds Clara there. She has told Bloch that she has the power to perform miracles and cure the afflicted, but it isn't working. She asks Artemy to cure one of the plague victims so that she can take credit. Artemy agrees to help and cures one of the sick with a panacea or schmauder. After leaving the hospital, Artemy comes across a townsperson who thinks that the army will arrest the Inquisitor, as the military and the Inquisitors hate each other. Artemy goes over to the cathedral to check in with the Inquisitor, who is as delightful as ever, pressuring Artemy about the panacea and also telling him that she thinks that the plague is related to the polyhedron. She just doesn't know how yet. Leaving the cathedral, Artemy finds Grace just outside. She is on her way to the polyhedron, along with all of the other children. Artemy goes over to the polyhedron and sees the strange children, Measley and Thrush, at the base. They tell him that they are from the inside, and that he won't understand. They've come because they are scared of the cannons and scared for the tower. They allow him to go up the stairs to speak with Khan. The children who had been staying in the town have now moved to the tower. They will wait on the stairs to make sure they are not infected before going inside. Khan will not let Artemy speak to any of the other children in case he himself is infected. Satisfied that the children are as safe as they can be for now, Artemy leaves them on their tower. That afternoon, Foreman Oyan sends a messenger for Artemy. Meeting him at Isidor's house, Artemy is told that he will now be able to enter the Abattoir, and that while he is there, he will learn why his father did the deed that saw him killed. Oyan does not want to elaborate on this now, and sends Artemy on his way. Entering the Abattoir, Artemy finds that he has lost all of his possessions. He goes down the tunnel and finds one of the Odong. The Odong verbally protests the idea of Artemy taking some of the blood, but does not stop Artemy drinking the blood from the font behind him. Artemy finds that the blood has healing and rejuvenating effects. Going deeper into the Abattoir, Artemy finds more Odong, who do more directly attempt to stop him from taking the blood, and he is forced to eliminate them. Artemy also sees the odd sight of her brides dancing with clouds of the sandpast, and seemingly remaining uninfected. Just past them, he finds his own herb bride, Nara, sitting on an altar. The other brides with her give Artemy a blade, and tell him that if he wants to know why the sandpast passes them by, he must trace the lines, to cut Nara so that she remains living. Artemy does so, and Nara tells him, "The earth doesn't want the town is killing her. The sandpest is the earth. Those that are connected to the earth are in no danger from it." Once Artemy has finished tracing the lines, Nara is dead, and Artemy finds a spindle inside of her. Artemy moves through the rest of the Abattoir, putting down the Odong who challenge him, and collecting a total of 5 vials of living blood, all the time hearing the voice of the plague echoing through the Abattoir. At the end of the path, Artemy meets another Odong, who directs him to tie it all together. Artemy combines a spindle from Nara and a candlestick and a fingernail that he found on the Odong to create a heart, which claims to be Artemy's own. It again explains that the plague will not touch any who do not have a thought of self. The heart urges Artemy to surrender his humanity and to merge fully with the kin and the earth. Staying in the Abattoir, though, is not a choice Artemy can make, and the heart tells Artemy to step into the pit where the blood of great bulls trickled down to dissolve into earth. The heart tells Artemy that this is where he will find if he is human or beast. Artemy approaches the edge of the pit and steps forward. He finds himself landing inside a decidedly more vascular tunnel, and makes his way through it until he finds a much larger heart, pierced by a spike coming through the wall, the base of the polyhedron. The heart is beating but weak, and while Artemy tries to talk to it, its answers are limited and vague, causing Artemy to question if it is just echoing him. Artemy makes his way through the tunnel and eventually finds a ladder, which leads him to the abandoned house where Vlad the Younger had been digging a well. Artemy finds that it is now 1 a.m. on the 10th day, and his understanding of the world has been dramatically changed. He now understands the town as the body of a giant bull. Foreman Oyan is waiting for Artemy and tells him that it was one of the kin that killed his father, though he will not tell Artemy who it is until he is sure their people have a future. He criticizes Isidor for trying to turn the kin into humans when he should have cared for them as cattle. Oyan does tell Artemy that it was Isidor that brought the plague back, intending that its re-emergence would serve as a vaccination and make subhumans into humans. Isidor believed that Artemy would continue his work. Leaving the abandoned house, Artemy stops by the theatre, where he sees himself speaking with the Inquisitor, who is telling him they need to flee the town. Artemy returns to his lair to start creating more Panacea with the blood that he had collected from the Abattoir, and sleeps while it is brewing. He dreams that he is back in the Abattoir, but in the place of brides in a dong are strange creatures with the same appearance as Artemy's tumbler toy. They are the last of their kind, and they worry that if Artemy does his job and kills the plague, it will kill them too, as they are also part of Earth. At the pit in his dream, Artemy finds his father. Isidor admits that he was patient zero, and that he brought the plague back on purpose. He says that the town was put together wrong, and was being held together by Isidor, Simon, and the mistresses by force. He tore it apart with the plague in the hope that Artemy would put it together better. Isidor doesn't want Artemy to follow any particular fate, just to understand. He says that the town needs to move forward to the future or the past, and that both are the path of love, and both are incompatible with the other, which breaks his heart. Artemy will need to make a choice, but not yet, and when he does, Isidor will respect his choice either way. When Artemy wakes up, the plague, in its executive form, is in his lair once more. It tells Artemy that it is taking all his children, all those on Artemy's list. As for the rest of the town's children, the plague tells Artemy that Commander Block has ordered them evacuated. Only Sticky has the chance of avoiding the plague, but all the other children will be unavoidably infected. Artemy has to go to each of his wards and cure them with either a panacea or a schmauder. While at the termitary to cure Taya, Artemy speaks with one of the dissenters and is now able to convince them to let Artemy try to form new connections, where his father had torn them apart. Artemy is now able to tell the kin, with Taya, to go to the old village. He asks one of the kin who killed his father, and they say they don't know, and Artemy asks that they form a council in the old village, and says he will be coming for an answer from them later. As Artemy is travelling through the town to cure the other children, he stops by the hospital, but finds that it has been closed down and is under guard. Artemy is not permitted to enter. Artemy also comes across the father of one of the children the army evacuated. This child had asked her father to pass a note to Artemy. The note tells Artemy that the children's caches are still around the town, and that a couple of the children left schmauders in them. In the middle of the day, a messenger demands Artemy report to the Inquisitor immediately, and Artemy is escorted to the cathedral. The Inquisitor has determined that the plague was caused by the polyhedron. The first outbreak occurred 5 years ago, just after the construction of the polyhedron. She says that the polyhedron pierced the heart of the town, though she means this metaphorically, and thinks that Artemy is just overworked when he claims there is an actual heart. She does listen to him though about the blood from centuries of rituals collecting underground. She plans to see the spike removed from the ground, and the blood caused to spill out. Artemy protests that the spilling of the blood will cause the earth to die, but the Inquisitor does not believe this to be true. When Artemy leaves the cathedral, he is confronted by a soldier demanding to know whose side he is on. Apparently there is division in the ranks of the army. Some loyal to Commander Block, while the others follow Captain Longin, and are mutineering against Block. Leaving the bridge square, Artemy decides to check in on Lara. He has sensed Capella telling him that Lara is in trouble. Artemy, though, has just missed her. Lara has taken a gun to Town Hall to assassinate Block. Some time ago, Block had court-martialed her father, who was then executed as a traitor and deserter. Artemy rushes to Town Hall and immediately on entering sees an officer who asks his identity, and when Artemy says who he is and that he needs to see Commander Block, the officer tells him that the commander is sick and that Captain Longin is in charge. The officer doesn't quite see the logic in a doctor wanting to see a sick patient and directs Artemy to leave. The fortunate part of the mutiny is that Commander Block was not there when Lara came in to kill him. Lara is still waiting and tells Artemy that the thing about Block being sick is a lie, and that they have arrested Block so as to be able to leave the town. Lara also says that her father had told her that the captain is actually incredibly loyal to Block, and the mutiny isn't real. They arrested him so he didn't have to disobey orders, and that he will be safe from punishment. With Block safe from both his orders and Lara, she agrees to give up her plan and go home. With Lara and all of the children now safe, Artemy goes to the old village to again seek out the identity of his father's killer. Artemy speaks with a kin there and is led to the answer he already knew. It was Oyon. Artemy seeks Oyon out at his abattoir and finds him at the pit. He confesses that it is true and that he killed Isidor. One of the kin had seen Isidor and Simon going out into the steppe, but by the time Oyon heard, it was too late to stop it. He found Isidor at home, already dying of the sand pest. He killed Isidor then to put him out of his misery. He doesn't seek Artemy's forgiveness. His guilt weighs heavy on him and he wants to die. Artemy can choose to kill him or to have him do the deed himself. But for this friend of his father, who shortened a life by no more than 3 hours, 3 hours that would have been nothing but torture, Artemy can also choose to forgive him. That night, Artemy senses another direction from Capella, this time pushing him to see the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor knows that the army plans to kill her that day, but she has a duty to get orders to the town hall for the army to bombard the tower. Artemy urges her to flee, to send couriers to the army in her place. The Inquisitor agrees and plans to send 3 couriers with the orders, but only if Artemy agrees to leave the town with her. For Artemy, this would mean turning his back not only on the town and the progress he has made in creating a cure, but also on the children he protects, and his own people. Artemy refuses to flee, and the Inquisitor says he is right. Fleeing would be the coward's choice. Even if Artemy had agreed, they would never have made it. They would have been stopped by the army, and the Inquisitor would have been executed anyway. As it is, Artemy leaves the Inquisitor in the cathedral. At midnight, the day ends and the town shifts. They shut down the fund. They shut down the hospital. There's no one left to save. The pantomime that evening is the executors debating humanity and what comes next for the town. They resolve to wait and see what the morning will bring. In the morning, Artemy goes to the town hall to check if the army received the orders to demolish the polyhedron. A soldier tells Artemy that the loyalists are back in control, and the army is leaving town at 10 p.m. that night. 3 couriers did come to the town hall, but they had missed Commander Block, and so split off to look for him. Conveniently, there were 3 outposts in town occupied by Captain Longin's men, and the commander could be at any one of them. The 3 couriers each set off to a different outpost to look for him. Outside the town hall, Artemy comes across the Inquisitor's body. She was right. The army did kill her. Curiously, when Artemy autopsies the Inquisitor, he finds that she has no organs at all. The closest outpost is at Lara's house. There, Artemy finds Daniel and a dead courier. Daniel killed the man to prevent the orders from reaching the commander. He does not want the bombardment to occur, seeing the polyhedron as the key to defeating death itself. To ensure that the polyhedron is preserved, he not only killed the courier, but also burned that courier's copy of the orders. At the next outpost in the steppe, near the cathedral, Artemy finds Clara. She tells him that the courier was shot in the crossfire between the mutineers and the loyalists. Even more unfortunate, the courier was shot in the water, and the orders he was carrying have been destroyed. Clara warns Artemy that there are more soldiers on the way. She begs him to sneak past them rather than see more bloodshed. Artemy is able to do so without them seeing him, and he then goes to the 3rd outpost at the station. Surprisingly, Artemy finds Reuben there, who is planning to leave with the army. Artemy can convince him to stay in the town with him as his assistant, to carry on Isidor's work. An officer tells Artemy that the fighting moved to the Crowstone, and Artemy goes there to look for the courier. Instead, he finds another officer who tells Artemy that the fighting has moved on again and ended at the factory. On his way through the factory district, Artemy stops by his lair and finds that the bull he bought on his first day in town is finally ready to speak with him. It asks him if the bull came, and asks him not to kill. Continuing to look for the courier and commander, Artemy goes to the Broken Heart pub and finds bodies of soldiers strewn around. Downstairs, it appears a gang has seized the pub, and the gang leader is amused when Artemy tells him his name and why he is there. He points Artemy towards the stage, saying there is another Barak chasing the general with some papers. The leader also tells Artemy to remove a bullet from one of his gang. If the surgery is successful, both Baraks will be allowed to leave. If it isn't, then they won't. Artemy performs the surgery and then goes to talk to Artemy. This Artemy says that he is the player Artemy's successor. The director has, however, washed his hands of the whole performance, So now this Artemy is just following his last stage direction. Namely, that Artemy Barak tries to ambush the courier, so he doesn't deliver the orders to the general. He doesn't know where the courier went, only that he ran. Artemy leaves the pub to continue his search, and is confronted by a collection of the kin and steppe creatures. They are there to beg for their lives, and that of their mother, Earth. They think it is not so bad to die, but what about losing something for all time? Artemy leaves them and looks for the courier. He finds him at the door to the lair, the orders still in his possession, and still intact. Artemy now finally has to make that choice between the past and the future.
Before Artemy can act on his choice, he notices the two strange children, Measley and Thrush, watching him. He approaches them and they urge him to think it all over once more. They tell him that the tower was brilliant in every way except one. Whoever lived there could never grow up. They find the tower too strong a temptation, and as long as the tower remains, they will stay too. But Artemy can change this if he chooses to see the tower destroyed. Should that be his choice, Artemy will go to the town hall. He will find Commander Block conversing with Clara, and he will give him the orders to destroy the tower. Block will thank Artemy for delivering the orders. And with this, the polyhedron's fate is sealed, and it is destroyed. It will leave behind a pool of blood, and Artemy will take as much as he can for use in its panacea. With the polyhedron destroyed and a cure for all of those infected, the plague ends. Everyone who survived until day 12 will live. His work concluded, the town is Artemy's to explore, just like it always was. Artemy makes his way to the Broken Heart pub, where Daniil and Yulia are talking to the Stomartin brothers. Daniil is upset at the polyhedron's destruction. He saw it as hope that he would be able to defeat death itself. But with polyhedron gone, so is that hope. Yulia has figured out that Artemy is the one responsible for the polyhedron and the plague's end. She intends to write a book about him, and hopes that he will come to the capital with her. Peter Stomartin is lamenting at the loss of the polyhedron, telling Artemy that his glass miracle has vanished, alongside Artemy's step miracles. Andre Stomartin is just angry, vowing vengeance on those responsible for destroying the polyhedron, but dismissing Artemy's claims if he says he is one of those responsible. Also in the pub is Anna Angel, who is in an odd state of mind, acting like a child, asking to be held, given candy, and to be sung a lullaby. Artemy opts to just leave her be. As for the changeling, she has gone to the abandoned termitary. She is dying. She feels that she has been torn in half and only a drop of her remains. She tells Artemy that he has no idea who is up above them, who Artemy actually killed, someone that Artemy wasn't even invited to meet. They are waiting for the changeling, but now she will never come. Artemy comments to the changeling that maybe one day he'll figure out her side of the story. Outside, Taya Tajik is holding court with Foreman Oyen and Aspedy. Like the changeling, Aspedy is coming to her own end. She is fading, a piece of the earth that will return to the earth. Notkin is nearby, and he tells Artemy that Artemy now has a half of his own. Notkin wants Artemy to take him into the kin. Sticky and Murky wait for Artemy at Isidor's house. Sticky is making plans for being Artemy's student, while Murky is just thinking about picking out her room. Artemy will also meet his old friends, Reuben, Lara, and Bad Grief, on one of the stairways to heaven. Reuben is conflicted about his choice to stay in town as Artemy's assistant, though he thinks that in the end, Artemy has turned out just like Isidor. Lara also wants to keep helping Artemy, though her help will be focused on helping him raise Sticky and Murky. Bad Grief seems to be recovered from his existential crisis, though he now claims to know how the cathedral's clock actually works, and says he will now be a clocksmith of a different kind. It seems that the town will be going through a number of changes. The Elder Canes are planning to leave the town, and to start a new one across the river. Georgi is still thinking of Simon though. He thinks that Isidor and Simon succeeded in vaccinating the town against death, though he does comment that Simon is still haunting his dreams. Ava Yarn is listening to the Canes make their plans. and she is planning on going along with them to the new town. Nearby the Elder Canes are the Suburobs, including their newest member, Grace, who is kneeling on the ground practicing her numbers, and tells Artemy that she has been adopted by the Suburobs, that Katerina is teaching her numbers, and Alexander is teaching her letters. She doesn't mind though, as when she has finished her studies, the Suburobs will let her return to the cemetery. She is a little bit sad though, not to live with Peter Stomartin anymore. Her adoptive parents also speak to Artemy, with Alexander telling Artemy that Katerina has given up the role of a mistress, and is now focused on bringing the cathedral back to life. In turn, Katerina tells Artemy that Alexander is no longer governor. Instead, with the Canes leaving, and the Elgimsky industry destroyed with the loss of the cemetery, Alexander is now the sole ruler of the town. With the last of the old mistresses having abdicated, Artemy goes to visit the new mistresses. Clara has decided that she will be a mistress, professing that she holds the power of divination. Maria Kana is planning to step into her mother's role as a mistress, and will not be joining the Elder Canes in the new town. The third mistress, Victoria Orgumskaya, is planning for the future of this town, and will unite the Orgimskis and Canes by marrying Khan. Khan confirms that he intends to follow Capella's plans, and says they will do everything together from now on. Young Vlad is also planning for the future of the town, or at least reimagining his family's industry's place in it. He plans on instituting fairer conditions for the workers. Big Vlad has less grand plans, and simply intends to work on himself for a time. Finally, Artemy returns to where it all began. He meets Mark Immortal back on the stage of the theatre. Mark isn't overly pleased with this play, considering it to be a flop, but he is optimistic that the next show will be better. Mark asks Artemy to contemplate who he is and what death is. He then declares the work is done and directs Artemy to head back into the dressing room. Artemy then can make his final choice. He can leave through the dressing room, leave Artemy behind, and go back to whoever he is outside of the play. He can refuse to leave Artemy and return to the town as Artemy, or he could remain in the theatre. Either way, his story will be done. If Artemy burnt the orders instead of taking them to Commander Block, the result is instant. His world will darken, and he will find himself back on the train with his fellow traveller, who is casting the most ominous shadow. The fellow traveller says that Artemy will have the rest of the day to say his goodbyes. The fellow traveller is relinquishing his claim on the people of the town. Unlike in the Diurnal Ending, Artemy is not free to explore the town. He is taken directly from one area to another to say his goodbyes, but he has no autonomy over where he goes or how long he stays there. Leaving the train, Artemy sees Sticky, who wants to know where the large balls around the train have come from, and is worried about the town, which has been flooded with miracles. Sticky wants to know what will become of everything. The moment Artemy stops talking to Sticky, he is transported to Murky's carriage. Murky has taken the lantern from the nutshell, as the nutshell is now empty, and no one will need it there. Rather than making a home in town in Isidor's house, this Murky wants Artemy to live with her in the train car from now on. Again, the moment Artemy stops talking to Murky, he is transported, this time to the steppe where the majority of townspeople are leaving, along with Daniil. Daniil is leaving because there is no place for him in a town like this. He will walk into the steppe with the townspeople, even though he knows that this will mean his death. As for the townspeople, none of them are themselves. They are all lost. None of them recognize Artemy, not even his old friends, Lara, Reuben, or Badgrief. Artemy is sorry for what he has done to them. Try as he might, Artemy will not be given the opportunity to say goodbye to everyone. He is taken away again before he can. This time it is to the Abattoir, where the foreman does not wish to see him, wishing that Artemy had ended his life instead. There in the Abattoir is the Changeling, who is contemplating the notion of a gate to hell, and whether they are all in hell now. Sticky has also appeared in the Abattoir with more questions, though he will not be satisfied with Artemy's answer. After leaving Sticky disappointed once more, Artemy will find himself taken to Aspity, who is at least one being who is happy with Artemy's choice and what he has managed to accomplish. She says that he has put back together that which his father had unraveled, just like Artemy's own children may one day knit back together what Artemy may unravel. Aspity says that she will now return to Earth and watch over Artemy from below the Earth's skin. With that, Artemy finds himself transported to the polyhedron. Taya is there, declaring herself to be the mistress of the bulls, and saying the kin are bulls, much less human now. Grace is there too and declares herself mistress of the dead, telling Artemy that the town has more dead than living now. The changeling also declares herself a mistress, proclaiming that she will try to love whoever she touches. Climbing the polyhedron, Artemy can meet with the devisers, who have some thoughts to share from the developers of the game. Descending the tower, Artemy finally has the smallest amount of freedom.
Freedom to explore the bridge square. He can go to the Crucible, find the buildings empty but the Odong outside. He can go to the cathedral where he will see Sticky outside the door, who questions him again about what he has done, and commenting that he didn't think the step would make it this far into the town. He can also find Ava Yarn inside the cathedral. She wants to become a herb bride, though Artemy will warn her that it is too dangerous, before he is transported again.
This time back to the theatre to meet with Mark Immortal. Just as with the Diurnal Ending, Artemy can choose whether to return to the town as Artemy, shed Artemy and return to their normal life, whatever that may be, or shed the guise of Artemy and remain another tragedian in the theatre. So that is it, the choice of whether to deliver the orders or not and the endings they create. But what of the Artemy that does not make this choice, or does not find the courier in time? That Artemy would be taken back to the theatre, to be berated by the executors for his tardiness, and told that the town is no longer there, due to the lack of interest on the part of the protagonist. Clara and Daniil would also be in the theatre, Clara talking about how Daniil and Artemy are just as bad as one another, and Daniil is busy rehearsing his role. Mark Immortal would also be displeased that Artemy was late and would fire him, directing him to leave through the dressing room, and telling him the town is now off limits to him. Sure enough, the door to the town won't open, and Artemy is forced to slink off through the dressing room. Artemy would find himself back on that train once more with his fellow traveller, who declares that they are now inseparable, that Artemy had the chance to shake him off from the town but didn't, so now he is off to reap a wider harvest, while Artemy tries to hold him back forever. Finally, a different ending, or a lack of ending, awaits an Artemy who struggled during their time in the town and died at least 7 times along the way. That Artemy might find his time in the town becoming progressively harder with each death, as his health, then his hunger and exhaustion are all impacted by his repeated brushes with death. Upon that 7th death, the fellow traveller will offer Artemy a deal. He will remove all repercussions of dying, restore Artemy to what he was before that very first death, but in turn, Artemy will lose something. Something the fellow traveller does not define, but may be important to Artemy, or not. The Artemy that takes this deal will find out what he has lost on the 11th day, when he tries to either hand in or destroy the orders, or runs out of time to make that choice. He will be directed to the theatre, and he will find the executors there, berating him once more about the choice he made.
They remind Artemy that he had made a deal, that he would give up some future important event. They tell him that this has now come to pass, and the game is over for him. Tomorrow has been cancelled, along with all subsequent days. Just like in the late ending, Clara is there expressing her disappointment in Artemy and Daniil is practicing his lines. Mark Immortal is furious that Artemy has ruined his play. He tells him that he and Death were meant to be partners, they were meant to be in a dialogue, and he's ruined it all, and destroyed the whole experience. And so Mark Immortal is done with Artemy. He intends to move on to someone who has more reverence for death, who feels more passionately about it.
Artemy is dismissed and slinks off once more, only to find himself back on that train carriage, with the fellow traveller off to reap the wider harvests, and locked in an internal struggle with Artemy. Forever. And that is the end of the story of Pathologic 2 for now. Hopefully Danielle's part of the story is not too far off, but in the meantime let me know in the comments what ending you think is the best. Do you choose the Diurnal Ending, where the plague is ended and Artemy and the townspeople can continue living happily in the town, free to do as they wish but at the expense of the earth and all of her miracles? Or would you prefer the Nocturnal Ending, where most of the townspeople are left to walk the step and eventually die, but the earth is preserved, the miracles were preserved, and the plague continues to exist in the town but is harmless to those that belong to the earth? Is that ending worse because it's sad, because it hurts, because it is a departure from the main goal of the game in stopping the plague? Or is it the good ending because Artemy was restoring the natural order and truly following in his father's footsteps as a leader of the kin? Let me know what you think. For those of you who haven't played or finished Pathologic 2 yet, I will be putting out a guide in a similar style to my guide to Pathologic 1. That video won't take quite as long to come out because most of the recording is done, so if you are interested, stay tuned, and I'll see you again very soon.